Hello, and thanks for listening to this week's episode of Secure Insights with NDK Cyber. Now, as many of you may know, NDK Cyber are first and foremost a cybersecurity recruitment company. We hire cybersecurity talent globally, whether it's a niche skill set, a tricky location, or you're scaling rapidly. The chances are we've done it and we can help you do the same. Now, we started the Secure Insights series really as a way to shine a light on certain important areas, to tackle hot subjects, to really give people a platform to tell some pretty cool stories in the space. Now, this week I'm delighted to be joined by Cole Grolmus of Strategy of Security. Now, Cole has spent some good time within PwC's Security Consulting Division before starting his own thing and then ultimately doing what he's doing now, which is all centered around consulting for startups, helping companies grow, tackling real world problems that they see, and ultimately he gets involved in some media commentary within that cybersecurity space as well. I'll let him do the full intro here, as there's a few moving parts. But in this episode, we talk around, where we're at in terms of cybersecurity from a vendor perspective at the moment. We talk through M&A and growth and what's good for the industry, what's not, and kick a few ideas around here. We look at typical strategic advice that Cole might get involved in, and ultimately what he's looking forward to in the future. So very excited to be able to share this today, and hope you enjoy. Well, we are now live. Cole, thank you for jumping on. Welcome to the pod.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Not at all, not at all. Now, I would have done you an introduction there. It won't have done it justice. Are you okay to give us a brief overview of your background and experience so far?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Cole Grolmus. I'm the founder of Strategy of Security. Strategy of Security, most people see the media side of that. So that is me publishing articles and social media posts on the more commercial aspects of the cybersecurity industry. So, sometimes that'll draw upon my practitioner background and uh, talk about, some more tactical or operational topics within cybersecurity. But, a lot of what I talk about has to do with the business and strategy and commercial side of the industry. So like funding, M&A, public companies, things like that. Um, my background in cybersecurity actually goes back quite a ways. Like I was fortunate to start working in tech as a fairly young kid, like probably 16 years old onward. I just got some good
Wow.
opportunities to do things. And granted, nothing serious. It's like network admin for my high school, but nonetheless, a really good way to get started and learn about the industry. Um, I kind of went through college, majored in management information systems, tech in the business school, and started working for PwC after that. So I started in PwC in the IT audit practice, which was around the time that Sarbanes-Oxley was pretty new and something that people were trying to figure out. And so that was kind of a high impact topic for people that were graduating around my time, and so that's how I started. I transferred over to the advisory cybersecurity and privacy practice right about as PwC was starting to rebuild the consulting practice. Like most of the big four firms had sold off their consulting practices around the time of like the Enron SOX period, and they had kept small practices, but then they were starting to rebuild. And so I am much more inclined to be a consultant than I am an auditor. So it made a lot more sense for me to move over to the consulting side at that point. I did that through the time that I was a director, so call it 11 or 12 years in total from intern through director. And then I left the firm along with another colleague to start a startup. That was something I like really always wanted to do. It was just a question of when,
Mm.
or at least thought I wanted to do. So we kind of stepped out of cybersecurity at that point or adjacent to it. Where we attempted to build a startup for engineering leaders and like what a little bit early. So now like now I think what you would call it would be like an AI copilot or an AI agent for software engineering leaders that takes a bunch of data and does fun things with it.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
At the time that was happening, it was pretty early. Like this was like open. I mean, like ChatGPT didn't even exist. We had like I have the email from Greg Brockman that gave me my early OpenAI playground access.
Wow.
But like functionally speaking, it was not anywhere near what we all recognize today. And so we were a little bit early on that. So I kind of decided that was, I had enough of that after a couple of years. Um, and then really took a step back to decide, what is it that I would want to do for the next decade or potentially longer, right? And I think that failure gives you a chance to think about that honestly. And I just realized like, hey, I really don't want to be a founder anymore. Like I want to do, or at least not a founder in the traditional, startup sense. Like I enjoy that environment, but there are other things that I would want to do within that are probably better aligned to my strengths. And so that was where I landed on, what you would now 4 years later recognize as strategy of security. I, my interest, I've kind of always had like three loves, right? Like I've really loved tech, I love business, and I developed a fair amount of domain expertise in security during my time at PwC.
Hmm.
And so I just really wanted to be able to tie all of that together and do something independently within the industry. And so I really just followed my interest and said, hey, what do I want that's also commercially valuable? And that turned out to be strategy security, which is the covering the business side of the industry.
Awesome. Yeah, and you're right. I think you're going back to the point at the top of your introduction there around the media stuff that you do. That's certainly what I first saw and spotted and continued to see it on the LinkedIn feed, and then clicked on the profile and it's, oh, hang on, whoa, there's like all this like PwC and founder and everything else. It's like, okay, cool. This looks interesting. So when you first started the strategy of security piece, was there an idea of what it could be, or was it just like out of that sheer kind of love and enjoyment, like I like doing this, let's see where it goes, or was there a bigger strategy behind it? I don't know.
It was definitely thoughtful or intentional. I don't think, there were, of course, like when you're starting anything new, there were some details or specifics or things that you just really don't have validation about that are hard to predict in advance. I definitely knew what I wanted to cover was more strategic in nature. I think the part that I didn't fully understand was where on the spectrum of call it like the industry side versus the practitioner side of strategy things would land. Um, and kind of much somewhat to my surprise, I think I realized that there was an appetite for a lot deeper coverage around again, the commercial and industry aspects of things. And it I kind of fairly quickly realized that it was unique to be able to take a relatively deep practitioner background. So all the experience that I had working with Fortune 500 companies and on partnering with vendors in the space, and then kind of like turn all that around to cover the commercial sides of it. Like that part felt new to me because I hadn't done it. I mean, I wasn't an equity analyst, I wasn't an industry analyst, I wasn't, an investment banker, I wasn't, I had, I worked for PwC, but not like a cybersecurity product company.
Mm.
So in some ways that all felt foreign, but it also felt familiar where I was familiar enough about it and I had enough of a business background that it was fairly easy for me to sit sort of in the middle of all that and connect the dots between what both sides were interested in and then also even like relate that back to practitioners in a fairly unique way, I guess. And so that was actually very organic and like it felt very natural for me to be able to do that. And then I just refined that over time or continue to refine that over time.
Got you. Okay, cool, awesome. And I guess then, so cyber, advisory work, strategic projects within that sort of cyber startup world. From the outside in, it just seems a hive of mergers and acquisitions, almost on a weekly or twice a weekly basis here. We're seeing with the headlines. What's your kind of take on the whole cyber vendor space at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a person who's been in this space for relatively long time. I mean, I'm still reasonably young, but I've been doing this all, also for close to 2 decades now. I mean, I think this is about as exciting of a time as there has ever been in the cybersecurity industry. I mean, of course, we still have very difficult problems like that. That's the good and the bad part about working in the industry, is that the threats are always changing, the adversaries are always changing, the things are becoming more sophisticated, and that's difficult. And so on one hand, you see the news kind of continually getting worse, or it feels like it's getting worse, or it feels like it's getting harder and harder to do the job. On the other hand, I just think the amount of like progress, innovation, maturity, financing, M&A, like all of the things on the industry side that make an industry good are coming together in a way that we've really like never seen before. And so at like a very high level, I mean, I'm super optimistic about being in the industry and what's happening right now, and all the things that are going on.
Awesome. And with the if we take M&A specifically and just look at that part of things for the moment, I mean, this week alone, very conscious recording this and going out, might be a sort of a 2 week or 3 week break. So, but the M&A activity, the mergers, the acquisitions even that are happening, is that good for the whole security ecosystem as a whole? Is that a positive, do we think?
I know that there are varying points of view on this. I'm more of the mindset that this M&A activity is a lot more good than bad, right? And I I think that's very nuanced. To summarize the nuance, it's like you really almost have to look at the acquisitions on a case by case basis. I mean, you're looking at a set of probabilities across many individual deals and many individual companies. Like, of course, there are going to be deals that don't work out. That's part of the deal. Like, you're not going to have 100% success rate, right? But I do think the level of sophistication and behind some of the rationale for why these deals are happening a lot of it is very good. I think there, I think there are more great companies to acquire than ever. Like if you look at just the amount of early stage companies that are out there and some of the deals that are happening, like awesome companies
Yeah.
that are being picked up and are going to make like a huge difference within their acquirer, and potentially become the next big business units or whatever. Like I think all that's really good. So yeah, I mean I think it's like a net positive. All the M&A is pretty good. I think like to get a little bit more specific, you there's kind of two macro observations that I think are important and about what's happening right now and span beyond individual transactions. One is we've had much larger M&A and much higher frequency of that large M&A than we ever have before. Like there's data behind that, some of which I've posted about, of just the rate at which large scale, so think like $1 billion plus, and in some cases $10 billion plus, M&A is happening at. Like it had occurred. There is history of that in cybersecurity, but the rate of which that's occurring now is much faster. Like the announced acquisition of CyberArk by Palo Alto Networks is a really good recent example of one that was over $20 billion. You can go back to Cisco Splunk. Like there's a lot of recent history around that. So I think that's kind of one major theme. The other major theme that I think is a bit less talked about is early stage startups in emerging industry segments are getting acquired earlier and at a higher dollar value and at a higher frequency than they really ever have before. Um, and like a bit more specifically about what I mean by that is like you could probably take like data security posture management is one good example, and then we're kind of in the middle of it with these security for AI companies, so companies who are protecting LLM models and usage of AI. Like those are both fairly emerging segments of the industry, but by the time we're like done with this M&A, these M&A runs, most of the companies in there are going to be acquired before they ever get big. Like they're exiting at sometimes a seed stage, sometimes Series A, no later than Series B. But like many of them will not make it to Series B. Instead, they will have, you know, 250 to $750 million exits, which are really good outcomes for everybody involved. But like they're never going to make it to the next level of being the next big standalone cybersecurity companies. Like they're getting acquired before that because the need is there, and we have strategic acquirers with the means to do so. So all this is to say, I think those are a couple of major themes, but the net of it is that I think most of the M&A activity in the industry is going to turn out well.
Yes, yeah. And that second point you mentioned there around it, I don't have the exact data points here, but it does feel as a sort of a general sort of, I guess, qualitative data point of the younger companies that, like you say, are Series A are getting acquired so quickly, and you just thought, oh, hang on, didn't they come out of stealth like 10 minutes ago, and then they got Series A, and then it's acquired, and are we working towards just having sort of three or four big cyber vendors in the space, and that's it, you know? So I don't know, is that what's going to happen here? Exaggerating, of course.
I don't think it's a wild exaggeration. I mean, I think it's still kind of a thought experiment and a very controversial topic in the industry, by the way.
Mm.
Um, you know, I don't think we're I don't think we're ever going to hit a point where there are three or four vendors and that's it. Like it's just there's too much going on for that to happen. But I do think the flip side of it is the three or four companies, or maybe slightly larger than that if you include diversified technology like the Microsofts or the Ciscos of the world that have big security businesses. Like, let's call it 10, 15, 20 very large cybersecurity companies. They're hitting a scale that we've really never seen before. There were previous attempts like the semantics and the McAfee's of the world at consolidating and building, broader suites of cybersecurity products, but like they never hit the scale that a Palo Alto Networks or a Cyber or a CrowdStrike or Cisco or Microsoft or any of these companies are at today. Like they were not in $5 billion plus territory, at least not with their cybersecurity specific portfolios. And so I mean, I think that's definitely something that's changed. It's a trend that lots of us have been watching for a while. The question is just how big can that go? Like, is it
Mm.
effective and is it good for the industry to have that kind of scale? Even if that experiment does work, though, I just don't think like putting my practitioner hat back on. If I'm a senior cybersecurity leader, I just don't see a world where I'm only going to buy all of my security products from one vendor or two vendors or three vendors. Like I might be able to allocate more of my budget in that direction if they, have a platform or have a portfolio of products that are high enough quality that I feel like I don't need to go somewhere else. Like that I could certainly see that happening, but there are always going to be gaps that need to be filled by specialized companies, whether that be ones that just kind of stick to their domain, and they've done that for a while, or very emerging areas that I feel like I need to work with a startup to do. So I think we're always going to have that breadth, but there is definitely some concentration among the bigger companies.
That's interesting to know from your perspective, and equally, if we take this back a step to that pre-acquisition stage, we're still seeing a fairly healthy amount of investment from VCs come into these organizations. I know there's some data out at the moment to suggest that's slowed down a little bit compared to 3 or 4 years ago. The whole post-COVID boom, quote unquote. But it still seems there's good interest, there's good activity. Is it leaning towards anything security and AI at the moment? It seems to be the flavor of the month of you need some sort of AI widget going on here to sort of catch the attention. I don't know what your sort of thoughts are in that world.
Yeah, I mean, taking a step back and looking at the macro point that you referenced, like I've written a fair amount about. I mean, coincidentally, I started strategy security like in 2021, which was like peak investment, peak
Yeah.
cybersecurity hype in many ways. I mean, that looking at the data, like at the funding data specifically, like that was kind of the peak, and then started to decline in 2022, and then we've leveled out from there. So, I think in retrospect, like, was there a bit too much hype on the investor side? Of course. I mean, I don't think it's controversial to say that. Um, what was it merited in some ways though? Like, yeah, I mean, it was a space that was probably under invested in before that. Like if I were to think back to like when I started working in cybersecurity in like the 2000s. I mean, nobody knew what that was. Like people thought that I
Yeah.
worked for the CIA. I mean, it was like not conventional parlance to talk about cybersecurity, and like it was just not well understood as a profession or even as a problem space. And so I think we were backwards in the other direction there for a long time, where like there were important problems that weren't being recognized and were under invested in to from the capital markets community in order to accelerate and build solutions and build meaningful companies. Thankfully, a lot of people did it anyway and kind of had to scrap their way through it. Those are many of the big companies that you see today. But then I think we kind of got flipped around there, where um, it looked like cybersecurity was a place to make quick money in, and it was just a bottomless pit of like upside. And so I think that's where you saw some of the investment activity getting a little bit out of control. But I think now like we're in a lot healthier place where um people are a bit more rational around needing to fund companies that are solving problems in spaces that are not already owned by a clear winner in the market. I think we've kind of always had this nice base of either specialist investors who only invest in cybersecurity, or broader generalist firms that have a very specific practice or a long investment history around cybersecurity. Like all of those folks are still there. I mean, they might be a little bit more methodical in their investments, but they've never gone anywhere and they've been there the whole time. I think like that's sort of the correction that you see now, where those are the folks who are the ones that are kind of leading the charge on the investments. So that's kind of the macro commentary.
Mm.
I mean, as far as specific investment areas, like I think there are a couple themes there. One of course is new markets, the funding around AI for security or security for AI. If you're to sort of split those two, that's gone from effectively zero back in even 2021 to now like there's a lot of investment activity going in either of those markets. So is that specific market segment overhyped? Maybe, but is there a lot of potential there? Like, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I mean, that's just like the natural course of an emerging market. Is you're going to see people get super excited about it. You're going to see valuations get wild, but there's going to be some big winners there. There kind of already have. There's been
Yeah.
some good exits already. I think the bigger question there is just like, will we see a generational company make it out of that space and become a really big one, or are they all, to our earlier point, are they all going to get picked up before they get a chance to become big? So that's kind of one segment of the investment activity.
Mm.
The other one is, it's like some of these core spaces, these core domains in cybersecurity are just evergreen. Like, we're on, I'd have to think about it, but like we're on, like, for example, our third or fourth generation of identity companies,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Like there, you have some, like, CyberArk, SailPoint, Okta that are at scale. You have a set that have kind of been acquired. You had some that came before them that are like now kind of the legacy players, and like then you have all these new ones that are cloud IGA or developer focused PAM or agentic AI, identity for AI agents, like all of that. Like, so there's a lot of really good stuff happening. But in that case, it's a mature market. It's been around for a while, but we continually have problems that need to be solved and new companies who want to solve them. And so there's a lot of investment in those areas too.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, and I think I don't know. I speak to CISOs in this world, and the kind of message that tends to come up is it's great that we're having all this innovation, this technology is coming out from all corners of the world, which is fantastic. But they also say on the flip side of that, and this could be more of a sales practice question than maybe a cybersecurity investment question, but there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of acronyms that get thrown around a lot. There's a lot of, I guess, that fight for attention is now there, and using an acronym doesn't always mean the same in each person's organization, so it can get quite confusing. So yeah, the message from the CISOs we tend to get is it's noisy, it's more noisy than ever, and we're not talking like just I've come back the week after Black Hat and I've got a load of messages. It's like constant and it's kind of relentless in a way. I don't know if that's because of the investment piece or that's just the way the world is now. Or...
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely empathize from their point of view. I mean, and I think they're the, technically they see a brunt of the noise. I mean, you can speak about noise broadly, right? And like, I agree that there is a lot of noise out there, but they get the brunt of it because, I mean, to them, what noise means is like, I have SDRs pinging me constantly. Like my inbox is full of it. I have calls, out of band, like all of that stuff happening. And so like, not to mention their normal job, which is stressful anyway. So I can empathize how they would run out of patience for that for sure. Um, but I just think like that's kind of if you were to abstract some of that back though and tie it back to some earlier points, I think all of that noise is an effect of being in a very dynamic space that still, has a lot of problems to be solved and is still, you know, in aggregate an emerging market. I mean, there are parts of cybersecurity that are mature, but like I would not yet call us by any means a fully mature, industry in the way that something like healthcare or oil and gas or like very established industries are. Or even probably some other areas of tech or software, if you were to even be more specific. So, that's a natural evolution. We're maturing, but like what what that means for the stage that we're at right now, and especially at like markets within that, is like when you get something new happening, like AI for security or security for AI, or even some of like these next gen identity companies, or name your emerging market, like you get 10 plus companies at an early stage that are in there trying to solve that problem, right? Like I feel like I see a new vulnerability management or exposure management company every single day. I mean, there's literally probably, Richard Steenan reports on this, quips about things like this once in a while where like there's, 120 companies in this space that we track. And like, that's the reality of what it is. And it's sometimes, generations of these companies piling up on each other.
Hmm.
So yeah, like in that sense, that's putting data and, you know, industry analysis behind what the noise, what translates out as noise to practitioners. But it's, I mean, it's real, but that's what happens in a dynamic industry like ours.
Indeed, indeed, and like you say, it's what's the other side of the coin? It's like, what do you just stop innovation and just stop these companies being made? No, I don't think that's the answer either. So, I guess it's a balancer.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that what that nets out to on the practitioner side is just like that's part of the reason why you hear people like both lamenting about being pinged all the time and also expressing the desire and interest for vendor consolidation, especially at the enterprise level, right? Like they don't have the risk appetite to work with a number of early stage startups. Like they just can't. And not to say that they won't ever, but like they can't base their entire security portfolio on that. Um, and they don't have the time or attention to be able to deal with all of that. And so like, of course, if a Palo Alto Networks or a CrowdStrike or somebody like that has a broad security platform that meets a lot of like the foundational needs that I have as a security leader, that's going to be appealing. Like I'm going to be interested in that. I'm going to work with them. It cuts down on a lot of the friction of procurement from being able to buy that, buy the products. Like that alone is time consuming and distracting. So for a lot of reasons, I can see why all of that is appealing, and I think why that's going to continue to be a trend, whether people like it or not.
Indeed, indeed. Cool. I feel like we could speak about this all day, and it's great to pick your brain on this sort of stuff. Unfortunately, we haven't got time to do that. So I wanted to ask you about some other things, if that's okay.
Of course, yeah.
But you give out and you specialize in this whole, strategic advice for these organizations that are growing and in that kind of startup world in this world. So I guess from your perspective, what are you kind of seeing as common challenges people are facing? What really matters under the hood? I know that's a very broad question, brother.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I mean, so the context too is that, when I was speaking about my background and what strategy security is, like what most people see is the media side. Like there is a consulting side as well where I spend, some of my time. It's me, so this isn't a team of consultants like I would have run at PwC, but I spend a portion of my time working with senior folks at cybersecurity product and services companies. So not like what I used to do, working with Fortune 500 security leaders within non-cybersecurity businesses. So now, I spend most of my consulting time working with companies, and um, they face really interesting problems. I mean, it's again, a lot of them are really good problems for the most part. Like that's again a byproduct of being in an exciting and dynamic industry in a period of relatively, intense growth and a lot of problems to be solved. And so that means, somewhat to my surprise, I mean, I guess I was familiar, but I was familiar as I was getting into this, but like what that has meant is a lot of like really interesting strategic problems on the commercial side of the industry as well. I think at a high level, if I were to bucket what I spend my time on, you could, at least for like the later stage companies or the public companies, you could probably put it under what you would traditionally refer to as corporate strategy, to some extent market intelligence if it's a more, external point of view. So that would be a little bit closer to what an industry analyst does. Or an early stage startup, it's, a little bit more hands-on. I mean, a lot of that ends up looking more like uh, marketing strategy, even more tactical, go to market sometimes, and even down in a product strategy. But those are kind of the high level buckets of where I spend my time.
Got you.
Um,
So go on.
I think if I were to try to draw some themes across the work, without getting into client stuff that I'm not able to disclose, um, the larger companies, like the challenge is always growth there, right? Like it's one thing to hit, $10 million of ARR or even $100 million of ARR. It's a completely other thing to be able to continue to grow and scale a business at $100 million of ARR or higher, right? Um, I think that puts you into a really interesting territory where you've clearly achieved product market fit. Like there's no way that you get that far as a business without that. And so you have some like really killer product that people know about and love, and and it's solving a really important problem. From there, it becomes a question of just like, what else can we do? Because there, even if you're solving like within a fairly large problem space and you've hit relatively large revenue scale, you're still a pretty tiny company. I mean, especially compared to like really large tech companies, or for sure outside of that, like we don't have companies in cybersecurity with like hundreds of billions of dollars of revenue. The highest we've got is like, as standalone companies is like $10 billion of ARR, give or take, right?
Mm.
So I think that's where you see a lot of these questions and strategic issues about, do we become a multi-domain company? Like, what kind of M&A do we need to do? What kind of new products should we offer? Like, those are the kinds of problems that are trying to be solved, within those scaled companies. And so, a lot of what I spend my time on is like M&A targeting, buy side M&A in investment banking terms of, looking at what potential market should we enter, and then the nuances of that, the competitive landscape, how that aligns with the existing product portfolio, how that aligns with like customer needs. Does it even make sense for us to do that? You know, if it doesn't, great. We decided it doesn't make sense. If it does, what companies should we look at? Then we look at companies and then we figure out, what would the acquisition price be? Does it make sense to build, buy, or partner? If we're going to partner, what are the commercial terms? What does that look like? If we're going to acquire, like what stage do we need? What are, you get into like really, really fine points around the strategic rationale when you're talking about buying a company, especially on the buy side, because that you've got to live with what you've acquired. And so there's a lot to think about. Um,
You got to live with what you've
so
acquired. Yeah.
all those are like very real problems. And I think to kind of tie that off, like the well-intentioned, I, I think that you could perceive that as like, oh, these companies just want to make more money, right? And there's only commercial intent behind that. And does that happen? Of course. But I would say as a person who works with these companies and these leaders who are out there on the industry side trying to do things with their businesses, like the well-intentioned people are always very well grounded in what their customers need, right? Like they're not just adding, they're not acquiring just to acquire revenue, or they're not like offering new products just to offer products. They have a pretty specific insight about what their customers need that is not being delivered from the product suite today. Maybe the customers are buying it somewhere else. Maybe it's an unmet need. It really just depends on the circumstance. But they really sincerely want to solve their customer problems, and then it just becomes a problem solving exercise for how you go about doing that, right? And I think that fundamentally, like, that's very important. It's really easy to gloss over that problem solving exercise and that insight if you just jump straight to the tools of like building, buying, and partnering. Like those are just means to an end. Those are ways of solving problems that ultimately should start from what does a customer need.
So you see people sort of bypass the let's do our customer analysis completely and just say, oh, there's X cool company over here. It's kind of similar to us. Should we get it in? Is that obviously it's much more complex than that, but is that something you see?
I mean, I think it happens. I may be a little bit biased. I love my clients. Like, I think, we try to stay grounded in, what needs do we need to meet, or what market opportunities out there that are, could be like, what could we do better? I mean, have we like had discussions about what does market consolidation look like if we just like acquire revenue in an existing domain? Like sure, that comes up, and I think those are good ideas to kick around. But like you just don't see that acted upon a lot in the industry yet. Like we're not at that stage of maturity where that needs to happen very often, right? What I was getting at was, I think if you're sitting on the outside looking in and just seeing like these M&A announcements happen, or these new product announcements happen, or what you could broadly perceive as noise when you look at it in aggregate, which again I agree with, there's a lot of this going on, right? I think you can look at that and just kind of assume like, oh, this is only like the commercial activity, like this is just built, everything's just built by partner, everybody's just out to make more money. And it's easy to get jaded by the noise, right? What I'm saying is that like that's true, and I do see a lot of that. I feel a lot of that because I'm sitting here looking at the industry for broadly for a decent amount of my time. I'm also sitting in the middle of these discussions that create that activity in the first place, right? Like that's the unique intersection of like my media work versus my consulting work. And what I'm saying about the consulting work and the people that I'm helping that are wanting to make those strategic moves, it is like that is well intentioned. They are not sitting there saying, I want to make noise, I want to make more money, I want to like bombard the market with this. It is not like that at all, or even shades of that. It is our customers have a problem. Like there's a serious issue that's out there. Maybe it'll be okay. I don't think that any of the competitors are doing this really well. So there's some of that, but regardless, it is well intentioned. And that's I think that's the part that's like easy to lose in the noise is like on an individual basis with a lot of these companies. We're all just trying to do the right thing.
Mm. This has been like so fascinating. I again, I said this before, I say it again. I think I could do this for hours with yourself, just to sort of pick your brains from your side of the fence as to sort of what goes on, the inner workings behind this all. And so, just to finish up and round this off, I guess we've talked an awful lot around, I guess, themes of now and things for today. What are you excited about the next 6, 12 months or so? What's sort of coming down the pipe for you that you're looking forward to?
I'm pretty excitable, as you can probably see from my work and maybe to some degree from this discussion. So, short answer is a lot. I'll try to name three things. Um, One, I'm very excited about AI. I know that that's sort of an easy answer. I'll give a little bit more nuanced version of it. Like in cybersecurity, there's a pretty broad spectrum and it tends to be polarized, right? Like if you sit there and look at the discussion and the reactions all day, like there's kind of one camp of the industry that's very anti-AI, like across the board, like both at the foundational like model level companies as well as like anything AI within the industry. And then there's like a complete other side of it that's like super jazzed about it, right? So I'm for sure more on the super jazzed side of it. Like I think just I'm a heavy user of AI. I mean, a very power user at this point. I think it's in the time that I've been in technology, it's the most one of the most magical, maybe the most magical thing I have ever experienced. Like, do I sometimes yell at my LLM? Of course, like there's still a ways to go, but I mean, even in the time of like when we were working on our startups and now, like it's incredible. Like there's like these things are amazing, and they just keep getting better week over week. And so I'm very bullish about AI in general. I think we're still a little bit lagging and a little bit early to be seen of like what the impact of AI and security is going to be. I think the involvement of security in broader enterprise AI deployments is encouraging. Like we've got a seat at the table way sooner than we have, a lot of other technology trends in the past. So I think that's really good. I, you know, I'm kind of on record from like fairly early saying that like I think that the opportunity of like AI applied to very different parts of different domains in cybersecurity is going to be like that's just endless. I mean, there's a lot that can be done there, and we like boy do we need the help. Like I for sure think augmentation is going to be the answer there. Like I'm not in the like we're going to fully replace humans or automate all of our jobs camp. I just think about it as like what is a AI fluent practitioner who has like significant leverage from very sophisticated cybersecurity tools look like? Like, man, is that exciting? And we
Mm.
need that. So I think, AI is one topic for sure. I am an identity person at the core. Like that is a lot of my practitioner experience. So I'm very excited about identity. I think this is like a renaissance that we're in right now. Like never been a better time to be in or around identity, both as like a practitioner and the like the quality and maturity of the companies that we have coming out. Both the scaled ones, like I think for sure like Okta, SailPoint, CyberArk, Savient, like name your larger identity companies, like they are doing very incredible things at scale, and we're seeing like consolidation on both workforce and customer identity. That's very very exciting. And then some of these new security startups are awesome, like the next gen IGA solutions, the next gen PAM solutions. Like I've talked about Twine Security and Agentic AI company, like just really amazing things. And so I think great time to be in identity. The last one that people don't talk about as much, but again, derived from my early experience at PwC, I think GRC is like one of the most exciting, like kind of under the radar, boring, but like most exciting spaces lately. I get that you can kind of make the argument like, oh, okay, it's not really pure cybersecurity. Fine, it doesn't matter. The reality is like as a practitioner, it's a big part of your job, whether you claim it to be cybersecurity or not. Like a lot of what we do is driven by compliance. For me to sit there and think about like what it was like to audit things very manually and to work with audit clients at PwC, back in early SOX days and the precursor to SAS 70 or to SOC 2s, SAS 70s, like that was terrible. That's a lot of work. It was very unsophisticated. It's very brute force. Like I understand why people feel compliance burden and all that because I imposed a lot of it, right? But like the Vantas, the Tradas, like a lot of these companies today, like really awesome. Like how deeply they integrate with the different security platforms or different different technology platforms is really cool. I in a way, in some ways, like it's almost like they made it too easy. So I understand the criticism with it, but I just think like across the board, the level of like integration, frequency, quality, coverage that you're getting out of governance, risk, and compliance is so much better than it ever has been before, and it keeps getting better with AI. So those are three things that I'm excited about.
That's awesome, and yeah, I love the GRC point at the end there. I got to admit that tickled me when you said around. I can't remember the exact line, but it was something to do with it's boring or whatever. But yeah, I think no longer. I think there's a lot of solutions out there coming through that really seem to save a lot of people that pain. So yeah, more for it. But Cole, thank you so much for taking the time there. I know you're a busy guy, you've got a lot on, so I appreciate you sharing your thoughts and everything. We'll get this out soon and speak to you shortly.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Thanks, man.